Hello, welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us tonight, you can join us on the Facebook live stream. So hello to all of you watching on Facebook, and more especially on to the YouTube live stream. So good evening and hello to all of you in the YouTube chat. You know me, my name is John Ruark, past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. And we have a pretty full crew tonight. So let's switch over to Robert for his introduction. Good evening. Hi, Robert.
Oh, hey guys.
What's up?
Robert Johnson, Space Novum, 1183. And Whence Came You podcast. Good to be here with you.
Alrighty, over to Jason Richards. How you doing, Jason?
I'm good. How are you, John?
I am fantastic.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Now that we've gotten the pleasantries out of the way.
Worst intro
I'm Jason
ever.
Richards. Yeah, I know. It's terrible. It's like we've never done this before. Jason Richards, past master of a lodge in Virginia and member of a lodge in DC.
Roger that. Juan Sepulveda, how you doing?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you, brothers. Thank you all for joining us. One step over there here from sunny Kissimmee, Florida, Senior Deacon at Large of Orange Blossom Lodge, number 80, and the brother behind The Winding Stairs, Freemasonry podcast. Good evening, everyone.
All right, and we have a special guest for tonight. We have Brother Jaime Paul Lamb. Good evening, hello.
Well, hello there, John. I'm Jaime Paul Lamb. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona right now, apparently the home of COVID-19 at this time. And I am a member of Oldwell St. John's Lodge number 6, Norwalk, Connecticut, and Ascension Lodge number 89, Phoenix, Arizona. Great to be here.
Awesome. Amongst many other side orders and degrees and all that cool stuff. But
Sure.
But it's great to have you because we're going to pick your brain a lot tonight because you've been making the rounds for a pretty special reason in this past month. But before we get into that, let's see. I also want to thank all the patrons supporting the show. We've been able to get equipment upgrades. We've been able to make Jason look better, and we couldn't have done that without your support. So if you listen to the podcast version, he looks even better. So I want to thank you again.
They told me I had the face for podcasts, but that was back before they did video ones.
Oh, rats. No vlogs. Yes. So thanks again. And if you want to support the show, head on over to patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable and chip in a few bucks. We do appreciate it. So tonight's topic is really about approaching the middle chamber because that's the title of Jaime Paul Lamb's book. But as we said, kind of in the green room, like, what are we going to talk about tonight? Because we all come at the esoteric side in one way or another from our own different viewpoints, from our own different interests and flavors, the things that we like, the things that we don't like. I really think a lot of this can be benefited from just kind of what inspires us for kind of our esoteric philosophies that we bring into and take away from Freemasonry and all of the other orders and degrees that go with that. So we can start off with the obvious thing of your new book that just came out that you've been working pretty hard on over the past year. So, Jaime, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I've always felt like, going through the fellowcraft degree, it just kind of came and went. There was that great lecture, and I was the senior deacon in my lodge, so I ended up learning the middle chamber lecture in Connecticut, and I knew that there was a lot going on, and I wanted to invest more time in it, but it seemed like this sort of like the Jan Brady of degrees. It just kind of this middle child. That we're in such a rush to get to Master Mason. Of course, there's the big, entered apprentice. Oh, I'm a Freemason now, and then it's just like, then this other degree, and then I'm a Master Mason, but it seems like the entirety of our intellectual kind of curriculum is in that lecture, right? And to me, that means, to me, that's the really active part of this. Like, I know it's sort of Juan's cornerstone, and a lot of our cornerstones, character development, and that's big for me as well. And I figure the way that we kind of do that is by making ourselves better men, and making each other better men. And I felt like the 7 liberal arts and sciences and everything, from the porch to the middle chamber, kind of just goes by too quickly. So I felt like, all right. And then I noticed that our literature was anemic in that area. I just couldn't find anything of substance that was like, okay, this kind of covers it. So I wrote a 450-page book that just, I go through the minutia. But I should say this, it's kind of my wheelhouse, occulty stuff, esoterica, things like that. So when I was younger, I read a lot of critical theory and things, Guy Debord and
Well,
Baudrillard.
I'm glad you brought that up
that.
because that's really what I was going to ask you is like, what's your influence? Because we kind of know you more recently as kind of that esoteric guy that can just wax poetic about numerology, hermetic arts, the little bit of alchemical stuff, and also the tarot. So, like, what's like been your inspiration? Where have you been pulling all this stuff from? Because I find it to be really interesting to see where people where do they absorb this stuff? Like, what influences them, and what gets you going?
It sounds sort of obscure and everything, but I've really loved a lot of not only critical theory, but like literary theory when I was younger. And I liked having this sort of interpretive perspective, like Walter Benjamin and people like that. I liked developing this vantage point from which to survey whatever subject it is. And I found a lot of value in analogous thinking, and applying that theoretical perspective to other narratives. Like, for instance, if you're watching, you go to the cinema, you watch a movie, if you're conversant in Greek mythology, you notice that there are certain narrative arcs that are recycled. You notice that in allegories and things like that. So, or they're allegorized. And are these allegorized from an agricultural cycle? Are they allegorized from an astronomical or astrological cycle? It seemed to me that there was this reduction of narratives that we had, and some of them, like, we really recycle the same handful of narratives.
Jason, like the Noahite legend, right? Is that one?
Oh, come on! Why you got to hurt me so good?
I've heard there may be more than one version of that story.
Yeah, perhaps like 500 different oral traditions. I don't know, but I mean, it's the same thing with like the hero's journey. It's we have these archetypes, whether Jungian or not, and we just like to recycle those over and over and over again in different cultures, different generations, because there's something about just a story that resonates with people on a deeply personal level.
Yeah,
it's also important. I was just gonna say it's also important to remember that when we're talking about those kind of archetypes and those ideas, that it's not really okay or appropriate, because we have a lot of people who will do this, typically in as a self-proclaimed deist. We have a lot of people in, say, like deist camps who will continually make reference to, they'll say things like Jesus is just the Osiris myth or the Horus myth, or whatever. They'll just line it all up and they'll say it's the exact same thing. And it's really important to understand that if you're doing archetype work and you're looking at those things, it's not the same thing at all. It's like similar on one or two aspects, and then the other 98% is completely different. So just a word to the wise out there when talking about this.
And that's
and
that's cultural adaptation, right? In order to have a story, especially a religious or salvation type of story, resonate with the people of a certain culture, it has to be deeply ingrained in the roots of that culture. And so that's why you have 500 different catastrophic or pseudo-catastrophic flood myths, but they're all the same, but they're all very, very different at the same time, because you can't just take and transplant a faith tradition without cultural relevancy.
Now,
I mean,
Jamie,
you can, and
yeah. Now, Jamie, you're Greek Orthodox, is that correct?
Yeah.
I mean, how long have you been Greek Orthodox? I mean, in other words, has that been an influence in how you approach religious and spiritual aspects?
I've been Greek Orthodox. I was chrismated 17 or 18 years ago when me and my wife got married. I was Catholic before that, so they recognized my baptism and all my sacraments and stuff, so they just had to chrismate me with oil. It was a pretty simple affair. I met up with the priest for about 6 months beforehand, just kind of meeting with him. He's a really hip guy. He had a big old oil painting of Dostoevsky behind him. Black hat, huge beard, typical Russian Orthodox guy. We're Greek Orthodox, but this was a Russian Orthodox church in Minneapolis where we were at the time. But no, I took to it very well, and I noticed that there were a lot of and as you learn more what to look for, there are a lot of vestiges of older traditions that survive in the Orthodox tradition. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, and in terms of applying, though, just to finish that thought, in terms of applying that sort of lens, that critical lens, to me, it's just like whether, and I understand it's a subjective thing, and it's something that sort of doesn't translate into every culture, right? But I find that the more vantage points or facets that I develop for myself, looking at whatever the subject is, kind of aids in the process of meaning making for me. So it just kind of enriches my experience of whatever the subject is.
So what you're saying is the immense objective look at a multitude of subjective opinions gives you a better subjective opinion of everything else. Look at his face.
Sure, why
Look
not?
what I just did to Jamie. Look what I just did to Jamie.
No, don't break his brain.
That's
man.
the face I made. So Jamie, that was the first. I think that was the face I made when I got probably about the 2/3 of the way book through your first book, Myth, Magic, Masonry.
Right.
So I'm a little bit scared, right? You sent me. I got a copy of your book before you made some changes. I provided you some comments, and now there's a book that's out there that maybe I don't like that I said I liked. What did you change? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, I could tell you what I changed. The Hebrew, when it went over into formatting, the Hebrew switched back to left to right.
Oh.
Other than that,
look at you.
Other than that, there was like a couple ifs that were supposed to be ofs, ises that were supposed to be ins.
I had
stuff.
I had a bunch of people.
So what he's saying
asked,
is he didn't take any of your comments whatsoever.
Perfect.
That's what I'm.
Perfect.
That's what I'm hearing.
I only said what I
It's
liked
probably a
about
good
the
thing.
book. That's all I said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
What I would say is that when I read this book, you do have a way with extrapolating the information in a way that is like highly technical, and I think that one of your gifts in the book actually is looking at things that is a spiritual way in a really like almost scientific, historical way, which is really unique. It's probably before Myth, Magic, Masonry, I hadn't seen that done in a Masonic text ever. In fact, the complete opposite. Texts that were revered by Masons and non-Masons and esotericists alike are texts by people who pull the information from the ether, pull the information from the realm. You know what I mean? And it's like you don't have anything to go on. And what I find interesting here is that you did exactly the opposite. You said, here's why this is this. This is what this is historically, in a really interesting way. So just right off the bat, man, like, thank you very much for providing.
It's an academics book, right?
It is an academics book, but
Mhm.
so much more, right? Because there's so many academics who will crap all over esoteric concepts, and yet here you kind of explained it and said, and if you sway this way, it means this, or I found it like both gritty and great. I think would you say 450 pages?
452 and 138,000 words.
Jesus.
So it's a bargain at that price then, per word.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Charles
Damn,
Dickens got
RJ.
paid. Charles Dickens got paid by the word, so.
Wow. RJ, that I am humbled, and I wish you would have wrote that for my blurb.
Well, I wrote two blurbs for you.
And Albert Pike got paid by the comma.
If I had given you the best blurb in the world, my writing that is not for Freemasonry, you would have got like the most gonzo punk rock review ever. But I can't say any of the things online.
You did send the gonzo, and then you said you sent the straight up guy, and I think we split the difference on those. Yeah.
Yeah, you mixed them.
And a 1,000 thanks for that. That was
man. 450 thanks to you. Thanks.
Jesus, could you believe it? It was gnarly. I mean, it was like, and I kept it on an email that I kept sending myself back and forth for a while. That was like, I'd write a little at work in my spare moments, and then I'd write at home and go to the coffee shop. And there were a couple of close calls where I could have lost, like, 100,000 words, 50,000 words. And it was tightrope walking with that sort of technical stuff. It was pretty gnarly. But in terms of, I figure in Myth, Magic, and Masonry, I was kind of learning how to put together a book, learning how to write a book. Jason Marshall and Matt Anthony from Laudable Pursuit kind of held my hand the whole way. P.D. Newman, super good friend of mine, and did the foreword to Myth, Magic, and Masonry. He kind of helped walk me through it too. So I learned a lot on that one, but this one I feel like I actually, wrote a book. It's a lot different. I mean, same voice, but a way different approach. And like I was saying, I went back to my sort of critical, theoretical approach. And I think maybe RJ, that's what you're keying in on, is that I approach these more numinous kind of mystical subjects. I'm interested in magic, right? And magic is very active, and there's a very developed theory to it, and there are sequences, and there are equations, and there are certain cycles set in motion that are very sort of quasi-scientific, right? And I think that approach bled into, obviously it would bleed into my work because it's a part of my just day-to-day life to operate like that, to be deliberate, and to, kind of think magically. And when you say think magically, people think, you don't believe in climate change or you're a hippie or something crazy, but that's not how I mean. I mean magic as in, the magi, magia,
right,
etc.
Theurgy, right? Mm-hmm.
Theurgy, Goetia, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
I caught a couple of those words.
Yeah. So one of the questions kind of in Facebook land is, would this be a good book for someone going through the degrees, or does it reveal too much, in your opinion?
Oh no, I think that I'm just saying, I think every single fellow craft, the night he is passed, and look at the word we use, passed.
Mm-hmm.
It's like another thing, like this is just something to get through, right?
Yep.
But anyway, I think the Knight of Fellowcraft is, or anybody who has been passed to the degree of Fellowcraft, just saying, I think you should have the book. I think it should be canonical. And even if, I gotta say, even if I didn't write it, you know, and somebody came out with a book that minutely went through that, whatever their critical perspective, mine happens to be Western Esotericism, but whatever their critical perspective, if somebody would have gone through, like RJ with the physics and things like that, whatever, you know, thing you apply to make it your own and keep it in your wheelhouse as a writer, if somebody were to come out with something, I would say you need this as supplementary material, you know, or I would say it's a good idea.
Yeah, so with our current lodge and with a lot of lodges actually right now in all over the world, you know, we have an additional kind of expectation of our members who are walking through the door. So a lot of times, for instance, my particular lodge, there's nothing really to give somebody who is on the threshold of Freemasonry. We have a book called On the Threshold, and we give them that. But aside from that, there's not a whole lot. So what we do actually is, going along with their assigned mentee, or I'm sorry, mentor, we'll do like a leadership book, something that isn't really Masonic. And chapter by chapter, they kind of operate like a book club until they get to a point where they're ready for the first degree. And then once they get the first degree, we assign some more reading materials. And we ask them to write a little something, right? Very popular thing to do today. But one thing that I always found interesting was somebody would say, Robert, what's a good book for the entered apprentice? And I'm like, man, I really don't have a good book for the entered apprentice. But then I started recommending Anthony Mangelli's Symbols of the Entered Apprentice Degree, which was a great book.
It's a great book.
Yeah, and then, you know, of course, Mangelli kind of disappeared a little bit. I don't know what happened, but that was a great book to give somebody to go, hey, before you're going to be brought to the second degree, probably a better word than passed, before you get your second degree, we're going to go through this with your mentor and take a look at it, yada, 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 right? You go through it, cool. You understand it a little bit better. But now there is a text for the second degree, right? This middle chamber book that you've done, I could definitely see, especially now in a COVID structure, if there's a lodge out there that says, no, we're not doing any kind of virtual degree work. We're doing real degree work. And if we have to wait a little while, we got to wait a little while, which means we have some time to spend. And you could go through and have almost like a book club for all of your EAs or your fellow crafts to go through and have a book club on this book. It just provides a great opportunity because you do break it down. It's kind of the way I started breaking down what we have in Illinois. We have intender books, one for each degree, and I started going through those and annotating the hell out of them because there's just not enough information, right? Like, it's what you kind of did reminds me of what I would do in Wikipedia in real time. When I'm reading something, oh, what's that? It's a blue highlighted word. Click, boom. Jaime Paul Lamb gives you what this is. And then he brings you back. Oh, and here's the next concept. Expand. And brings you back.
I call that too much free time on a Saturday night when you go down the Wikipedia rabbit hole and you end up like researching like the mating habits of penguins in Antarctica.
Yeah.
You're like, this is amazing. Yeah. How did I get here?
But what a great...
Yeah.
But it is a second degree tool. And I think a fellow craft could read it, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think anybody who's seen the lecture and knows how the lecture is structured. I mean, because it was the easiest outline I ever had, because it was you know, I just threw an introduction at the beginning and kind of a summary after the G lecture, and you know, bada boom, there's a book all kind of sequenced already for me. All I had to do was hang meat on the skeleton, you know. But
you're the Albert Pike of the middle chamber lecture,
with fewer commas.
Yeah,
except for every comma, you've got a paragraph.
Yeah, or a semicolon. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, Jamie, if you can I'm sure that even though you were familiar with the middle chamber and it was an impactful part of your initiatic experience, I'm sure you might have come across things from a different perspective on this exegesis. So can you give us any insights onto anything that you came across, of course within reason, that made you look at something from the middle chamber from a different perspective?
Yeah, there were a lot of little findings along the way. I got to say that I think there are probably, I'll say, hundreds of original observations. And I'm very clear about that in the introduction, where I start, like, because I'll bring in tarot symbology, I'll bring in Kabbalistic theory and a bunch of, Western esoteric kind of perspectives into it, just because it's what I do and it's my area of interest and my area of expertise. So I go there readily. So there were a lot of things that I found. There, I'll say that while there were hundreds of original observations, which I make very clear when I'm going off on one of those, even in the text, it's nothing like, I'm not out to say tarot symbolism exists in situ in our work, because that's anachronistic. That isn't right. So I don't, I try to be respectful to I try to be rigorous, and I don't want to perpetuate any errors in research, so I'm responsible in that sense. But there were 5 probably huge things that were revelatory to me. I'll give you one of them. Maybe one of the bigger ones was in the astronomy section. I was going through Kepler's Mysterium Cosmographicum, and wherein he
As
sort
one
of takes,
does, right?
as one does, right? And wherein he takes the Neoplatonic sort of spherical model, concentric spheres nested within each other, 7 of them for the 7 spheres, right? With the Earth at the center. It's a geocentric model. So, but in Kepler, he's post Copernicus. So his thing is heliocentric, right? So I wasn't even thinking about that when I started to apply a Kabbalistic exegesis to it, a Kabbalistic, more accurately, like a hermeneutic to this model, right? And I'm going through Kepler, and by the time I get to get into a little detail, by the time I get from Netzach to what would be Tifereth, so from the sphere of Venus to the sphere of the sun, I found that, wait a second, he's going from Venus to Earth, because this is post Copernicus, right? And then it dawned on me, oh my God, we've been dealing with a geocentric Kabbalistic tree of life this entire time. So I quickly got on the internet and I was like looking for heliocentric Kabbalah. I found nothing. I couldn't believe it. So I was like, okay, this is super cool. I'm not going to tell anybody about this until the book is published. I'm going to get my foot in that particular door and maybe expand on that a little later. So there were like 5 things in the book that I think were massive, and I found them through minutely going through our work as fellow crafts.
Do you have a diagram of the heliocentric version in your book?
No, I didn't. I just put my foot in the door saying,
interesting.
Okay, yeah, because I could have gone on and finished out the chapter talking about that, but I felt like, okay, I established that this is the case here and that we've been dealing with this geocentric Kabbalah. Yeah. What would happen if you switch Malkuth with Tifereth? And I know you just recently read Kabbalah for Dummies, John.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Because I saw it on your. So you know that if you take Malkuth, or the Earth, and you switch it with Tifereth, the sun, then all of a sudden you have the sun where Malkuth is, right? And then you have a heliocentric Kabbalah. The only thing is, just to tie up the last of that thing, when you move Malkuth to the center of the tree where Tifereth was, you have to have only one path going down to Yesod, because Yesod, the moon, is a satellite of Earth,
Right.
making an
It's
epicycle.
the closest one, right?
Exactly. So you have one path going down from that central Malkuth to Yesod, and then the rest of it is heliocentric, and boom, heliocentric Kabbalah, which will be a book at some point here. Or if somebody else writes it, God, I hope they cite me.
I mean, it reminds me of like the old research papers, that like doctoral students have to write. They just scratch the itch, and then they say, okay, and further investigation should be left to the next party. They just leave it hanging and let everyone just dive in after that.
Yeah, there were I'd say at least 5 biggies like that you'll encounter along the way. But like Pierce Vaughn wrote the foreword. He said that they're kind of hidden in there. They're woven in such a way. Like, I've always hated reading Arthur Edward Waite. I just think his tone is torturous. It's a disaster. I feel
Robert agrees.
none the wiser reading it. I think the meat or the substance is there. He's just like, maybe his Mercury was screwed up in his natal chart or something like that. But it definitely debilitated or afflicted Mercury on that guy.
Arthur Edward Waite would definitely disagree with you, Jamie, and
I'm sure.
And he would also say, and he would tell you that your opinion doesn't matter because you're not Arthur Edward Waite.
Yeah, he would. You ever see his annotation to any of Eliphas Levi's stuff? The footnotes take up more than the main text.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's bashing, and he's
every couple sentences he spends a paragraph telling you why this is incorrect.
Yeah, exactly. In the most torturous, labyrinthine language. It's hellish.
That's hilarious because we talked about this exact thing with Mackie, right? Back like 2 weeks ago on the show.
Yeah. Well, Mackie's a breeze compared to Waite, as far as I'm concerned. Mackie at least makes sense.
Well, Mackie takes a historical, well, I shouldn't say historical. What he does is he actually presents ideas, has them there, and you can read them and you understand what you just read. Waite, you go through it and you go, did he say anything at all?
Well, yeah,
Exactly.
I like the prose that he has, but he definitely obscures things deliberately in order to leave it to the reader to come up to the conclusion. Well, like, right. I'm reading the text to find something, and you're gonna dance around the subject. I'm not gonna.
He dances around it. He dances around it because he does that because then you can never say that he's wrong. It's the classic, esotericist view. If you can't do something, it's because you didn't do it right.
Oh, that's not what I meant. Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. It's a safety measure, and it's a way to sell books.
Yeah, it's the same as the old adage: if I can't dazzle you with my intellect, I will baffle you with my BS. And I think there's some of that going on with him.
Oh, there's a lot of that with him, with McGregor Mathers, pretty much anybody, in my opinion, 1900 to, I don't know, 1950-ish.
So pre, during, and post spiritualism age.
Well, I think that's really where we get a lot of that problem. It comes from the spiritual age,
everybody hopped in, so it was who could be the most decorative,
obscure, and occult and ornate. Yeah.
All because of some girls decided to knock on tables or pop their ankles, in New York.
Yeah, so maybe Pierce didn't mean what I thought he meant when he said, this takes us back to the work of, I forget the exact quote. Waite was in there. He equated the tone and the style with Waite and Wilmshurst and that sort of thing. But
well, Wilmshurst, at least, again, I think the two prolific writers who kind of wrote something similar were Wilmshurst in his I guess I would call it like a core dogma of Freemasonry that he kind of exposes and dances around, and Plumer does that also, but Waite just never does. where I
Yeah.
think you actually you might not come out and say it, but you're holding a microscope over or like a magnifying glass in front of it for you, the reader. So you can go, oh, dang. Yeah.
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 Hopefully there's a
Moments of
lot of oh
self-discovery.
dang.
Light
Yeah.
bulbs. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be nice. But I want to, it's so rare I get to talk to Juan, and we had such a great time. I always cherish our interview we did in Manassas there for
Yes.
Esotericon, and I just remember laughing, and I don't even remember what we were laughing about, but
Right.
laughing and laughing and laughing, and you know that I've always been involved in this on the esoteric side of things, but I value um, the perspective of character development. It's become more and more important to me. Every year I'm in every year I'm in Masonry. I find myself drifting more and more towards, in my personal practice
Hmm.
to my character. And like my main thing lately has been obedience, poverty, and chastity. You ever hear those
Ah,
three?
yes, I've
Yeah.
heard them in the Jesuit order.
Exactly. So I picked him up in Meditations on the Tarot, uh, Christian Hermeticism. You know that big fat tarot book. That's where I found him, and I've just been, of course, chastity. I'm married, and that's not going to fly, right? But it doesn't mean literal chastity, right? There's ways we interpret that, and ways that we. That's the book. Yeah, really
Yep.
amazing book. Yeah,
I
obedience.
I picked this up because you put it on Facebook and said this is an amazing book.
Yeah, yeah, it's really great.
You're an
It's
influencer.
just an
Yeah, you're totally an influencer, Jamie.
oh my God.
Yeah, Jamie, I really
Yeah,
appreciate that. We did had a great time when we met at Manassas. It was the first time we had a chance to sit down and talk. And
yeah,
I've told people, I said, listen, you know how when you meet someone and you hit it off, and it's like you've known each other for a long time. That's how I felt with
yeah,
Jamie. It was so
yeah. That
it was very good. But
it
I
was
appreciate you
obvious.
saying that about that practical application. Of course, is something. It reminds me of my position when I started with the Masonic Roundtable. I knew there are things about Masonry that I'm interested in, and there are other aspects of Masonry that I wasn't interested in at all, and I saw them as so external to me. And coming into these conversations with that open mind has expanded. And I love how beautifully you put it, that you keep on building all these facets through which you can see things. So as you expand and you add more facets to your complexity, to what you are about, then when you look back at those things at different things in a singular way, they're illuminated by all these different facets in a completely different
Mm-hmm.
way than someone who is just looking through one, through one facet. I think that's fantastic. So I love how you illustrate it, and I feel that I'm more open today to that, and I feel the better for it. So I really appreciate having conversations with brothers like you, and all the different brothers that we've had the pleasure of speaking with, who kind of say, wait a second, I know you've thought about this in a certain way. Look at it from this perspective. When you were talking earlier today about magic, how that's what one of your big interests, your wheelhouse, and you touched in on the point that people sometimes, like, they step back. It's like, okay, what do you mean by that? And
Mm-hmm.
they don't necessarily understand what it means. There's practical magic. There's the magic that you study, and it manifests in your life. It informs the way that you live. It's not just something that it's outside of you, something that's part of you. So I appreciate you giving us that perspective.
And that's a brilliant point right there, why we would even approach the craft, right? So is it something where we think the tracing boards look cool, or we like the literature, or we feel like dressing up, or or some Illuminati sort of smokescreen stuff? What is our reasoning behind that? And sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we're aesthetically attracted to something, but that doesn't mean it's superficial. Just because the aesthetics of something attracts you doesn't mean that that's all there is, or that's all that you want out of it. And I think that that's been the case for me. I couldn't tell you, like I could tell you today, why I approached the craft, because those reasons have changed quite a bit. And I think they've been enriched by my experience in the craft. But I do think it's important for us to, or for me, to periodically kind of do that calibration and be like, what am I doing this for? Am I still on course? How is this active in my life? How is this enriching my experiences in and of the world, and my relationships with people and phenomena, and even objects, and my vocational life, my personal life, etc. It's a holistic program, that we can kind of, um, there's so much available for us to use while still being under the purview of Freemasonry. It's such an amazing schema, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and closing yourself to it, and like this happened to me. I have a family member, and I sometimes find it difficult to engage in conversations that are not strictly lined up with that person's interest. And I try to find ways of presenting things that perhaps that person doesn't have an interest in, but in terms that make sense or may pique their curiosity. And I remember explaining, like talking about astronomy, for example. You don't need to be an astronomer. A you don't have to spend the rest of your life studying it. But there's an element that you can become familiar with that is going to inform other things. Like when you talk about like why planets orbit the sun and that proportion of mass to gravity, and how it attracts things, that as above so below, like that is a similar concept. Then when an individual is able to build himself up and add more value to his life, to his intellect, to the life experience, then he creates that gravitational field around which other people will align, and they will converge in that orbiting. So the more we open ourselves to these things that perhaps we weren't once interested in, we open ourselves. Like tarot is one that el tarot. Let me say it how I say it. Years ago, I had zero interest in it, and if someone started talking to me about tarot, I would be like, okay, like this is not. I'm not interested. But having these conversations has opened my mind. When I've traveled and I have a dear friend pull a card from his deck and put it on my heart and on my hand, and now that is a treasured gift that I have that has great significance. That means a lot.
Yeah.
So for the brothers that are listening, give yourself an opportunity to not say, "Oh, I'm not into blank." No. Approach it from the point of view, what can I learn from blank? Or tell me more about blank, and then soak it all in.
And what you said was really so hermetic right there, like a core hermetic principle, that being the cosmic sympathy, right? The resonance between the microcosm and the macrocosm. And you literally just said the equating man to this microcosmos, the little ordered system, right? And how gravitational pull and the orbits, and that being a model of man, is just like quintessentially hermetic. So it's like, yeah, I think of you as being kind of into the character development, and into not necessarily into esoterica as deep as some, let's say. Um, but for you to go ahead and say this, what I view as a classically hermetic thing to say is like we're all essentially just kind of zeroing in on our subject from our perspective and developing those other
Yeah,
perspectives.
it reminds me of a um, F. Scott Fitzgerald quote that says, you know, the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in mind at the same time and still remain the ability to function. Right? That
Mm.
you can listen and understand and try to chew on something that may be contrary to what you believe, contrary to what you understand, but be able to hold those two independently and be able to analyze it for its sake rather than trying to go to all the cognitive biases that we tend to have, right? And that's that is something that I think we should all strive for. Um, and another word that came to mind when you were describing all of your influences and how it kind of, you know, every time you learn something new, it adds, it sticks onto that Katamari Damacy ball that you have of is Gestalt, right? It's the Gestalt of all of your experiences makes the sum of the parts, you know, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I think that's a nice analogy to show how this is why we have to dabble in lots of different things, is that you have to get out of your comfort zone, you have to experiment some, and really try to test your own ability. So let's go scientific. Test your own ideas and beliefs amongst these new things that you're learning. And if their beliefs hold true, and then great, keep going. If they tend to fail, now we need to really stop and reflect. I mean, like, just what's going on in the world today about, geez, I don't know, 2020. Let's just say 2020 in general, right? And half of the stuff on Jason's shirt is, you know, it causes
Way
you
to
some
call that out. Thanks.
Yes, you know, right there. Let me just zoom in on Jason. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, how many people did I just trigger?
But that's the point, is not to trigger, but it's to understand, right? Seek to understand, don't seek to be right. And if we can just do that, we'll be a much better society. That's really, I think, part of the journey that we're all on. So sorry to get all deep on that, but that's what I really enjoy about having conversations with gentlemen like yourself, because that's what we're here to do. We're not here to be better than anybody else. We're here to be better than we were yesterday.
Right. You know, it's brilliant too. You brought up synthesizing these ideas and this gestalt, right? And this more holistic kind of worldview, ever increasingly holistic worldview. And have you ever had? It reminded me of a phenomenon that I've had a lot, and I'm sure you all have, where you're reading multiple books at once. And somehow, you know, and maybe going back and forth, a chapter of this one, a couple chapters of that one. I'm sure we've all had the stack on the nightstand that we're just chipping away at gradually. And isn't it strange how sometimes, isn't it strange how sometimes they weave into a meta narrative, kind of, you know? You'll be reading separate books and somehow certain things will line up and they inform each other. I think that that's the
Yes.
perfect analogy for what I've tried to do in my work, you know, is kind of, granted it's from my perspective, but to weave a sort of meta narrative onto the Fellowcraft lecture, the middle chamber lecture.
Yeah, no, I live for those moments where synchronicity kicks in, and all of a sudden, all these things start like locking in. You're like, oh my gosh, does everybody see this? Like, you're the only one who sees it, but like,
Yeah.
everything's making sense. I can smell purple, you know?
Yeah.
Oh man. So yeah, so just kind of another thing to ask about, if because of your background and because of what you put into this book, I wouldn't say like what are some prerequisite knowledge, but what are the types of things in like the Western esoteric tradition that would benefit the reader knowing that they're getting into as they read the book? You know, because we skimmed a little bit about that, but like cover a lot with astrology and numerology and the tarot and other influences. So like what can the reader expect if they're trying to dive into the mind of Jaime Paul Lamb?
Well, I think the way that I sequence it and the way that I kind of build up an argument when I'm bringing up those things, there is no prior study necessary. And I have several appendices at the end with charts where you can kind of reference if you ever feel like you're swimming in something. I even say in text, see Appendix A, see Appendix D, E, whatever. I have plenty of them back there. But the other thing is this that I think is probably even more important than that sort of referential stuff and building it up in text in real time is, and I'll use the tarot for an analogy. A lot of people think, you can't immediately begin working with tarot before you read several books on it and you become conversant with the stock interpretations and the little white book and et cetera, et cetera. That is not the case. I think that the real value in tarot is and I'm again just using this as an analogy. The real value is pulling a card and letting the symbols just say what they have to say to you. They have what's, without over theorizing it, without over intellectualizing the endeavor, just look at the card, take some deep breaths, see what it has to say to you, because there are, going back to Jung, right, with the idea of the collective unconscious, that there are theological, mythological, sort of alchemical images that emerge naturally, and we all sort of share this body of symbolism. Or at least that's what he said. Whether you believe that or not is inconsequential to my argument. But I am saying that we have we can have an unmediated experience of symbolism if we stay out of the way intellectually. So I would say if you're approaching my book, right, and something, you feel like it's not clicking, or it doesn't make sense, or you're swimming in it, or you're lost, either consult the appendix or just kind of take it at face value, and what needs to make it through, I hope, will make it through, and it was designed to kind of work that way. So
Jamie, I wanted to expound on that because that is a phenomena that I've had a lot of experience with from way before I was a Mason. I make a living as an artist, so I create paintings in a surrealist style. And for those who may not know, surrealism is a style that takes elements of reality and puts them in very unique or different scenarios. And normally I would create the paintings for a reason. I had a story or I had a lesson that I wanted to convey through the painting. And I would make the arrangement, do everything, and put it in front of people. And it would surprise me how one painting that to me was very obvious what it said, to a complete stranger, it spoke in a different way, usually in a way that was better aligned with what was going through their life, the needs that they had as individuals, than anything I could have said to them about the painting. So I learned to get out of my own way when it came to presenting my paintings. I would do a show, and snobby artists and curators and gallery owners usually tell you, "Oh, don't explain what your painting means." And I respect that. I don't explain it unless people ask me. And then if they ask me, I have no problem telling them what I intended to create. But it's surprising to see how you don't have to tell people what a poem means. They read it and they're able to bring out of it all these different images that inform their own life or help them in their own journey. So I look forward to people picking up your book and giving those words that same opportunity, reading and experiencing that and seeing how that informs them based on the lens that they're looking through.
Thanks, Juan. Yeah, that's basically you're describing my perspective on astrology. too. I mean, for me, it's much like art appreciation, and that sort of digestion of symbolism, how we do that and staying out of the way. I think that, I mean, how many people think astrology is BS? I mean, I think deterministic causal astrology is BS. I don't believe that these planetary bodies occurring in imaginary houses and signs that don't even work from the perspective of other than the perspective of Earth. I think it's arbitrary mechanically, right? Which is fine. But I find value in astrology because it is because of its symbolism, because we have attached 7 archetypal, if we're just talking classical personal planets, right? We've attached these for millennia, since Sumer, almost 6,000 years ago. We've attached these 7 sort of archetypal concentrations to these planets, right? So they mean something, and they mean something even if you watch The Breakfast Club, for example. And Ali Sheedy is this lunar character, and Emilio Estevez is the martial character. P.D. Newman and I have totally kind of gone through there's just these archetypes, right? And we've attached them to the planets, and those planets are zodiacally conditioned, because they occur in certain signs, and they affect certain areas of action, or the houses, right? These existential arenas in which these zodiacally conditioned planetary archetypes play out in our lives. And to me, that is super interesting. It's interesting for me it's philosophical. It's not mechanical. It doesn't have to be. I'm not out to prove it. I'm not out to prove tarot to anybody. I'm not out to prove magic to anybody. I've got no axe to grind on any of those fronts. It's appreciation. It's enrichment of experiences in life.
Well, I think it's
literally, I was just,
go ahead.
If I could, I was just going to say, what I really appreciate what you just said is that you're putting value in a system, regardless of whether or not something can be proven as literally correct or interpretively correct. You're saying that we have like sets of guidelines, like for instance with tarot or with astrology, because I'm with you. I'm like, there's just no way this makes any sense, in any real way. But what it does is it allows you to say, in the context of these buckets that we've assigned, this is what this could mean for me. Let me look at it that way and see if that's true. And it always will be true. Right. Everybody's always like, oh, the tarot card, the tarot reading was the best I ever had in my life. It was true down to the every last card. Well, of course it is. It's always going to be true for you because you're always going to find a subjective value in it.
That reminds me
that's the goal.
That reminds me of a Reddit thread that I was looking at some software, and there were some issues that were going on, and one of the users was going back and forth with one of the software developers, and he says, actually got it to work by typing in my password with my left hand, and to which the software developer said, that's going to make it into our documentation, right? Like, type to fix this problem, type the password in with your left hand. Doesn't matter if it works, right? So that's what a lot of this comes down to. If it works for you, great. Let's kind of wrap things up on that note. Jason, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and I think Robert, we're not up against a time limit.
The internet's going to run out of space.
Yeah.
That's what ESTJ is showing. Yeah. Sorry.
It's just because you have that stupid timer running now. So Robert hit something really on the head with the idea of using the tarot as a conceptual framework and kind of a lens with which you can view certain pieces of your life and certain interactions that you're having either with other people or with events or occurrences. So it's I don't put stock in fortune telling, but I've been very, very interested in the tarot as a set of lenses to view my life in and to use as a kind of different ways of different perspectives of looking at problems and trying to solve problems. So that's that's what I think the tarot and a lot of esotericism is good for. It's a different frame of mind, to view what's happening in your own life. And if that gets you closer to God or the Creator, or firms you up in your spirituality, then that's fantastic as well. But I think practicing esotericism, inherently betters your life and gives you different perspectives on enables you to react differently and grow more as a human being. And Jamie's going to be like, that's all BS.
Nope, don't believe any of it.
100%.
So, Jamie, we'll give you kind of the beginning of the last word as we start to wrap things up, because where can people find your book? And then tell us anything else that you want to know before we send everyone off for the night.
Well, they can find the best place to get the book is on the Laudable Pursuits website right there. I think it's just thelaudablepursuit.com, and then if you go to the bookstore, both of my books are in there. So Approaching the Middle Chamber being the latest one, and then Myth, Magic, and Masonry is from 2018. But if you can't do that or don't want to do that, or if you have Amazon Prime where you live out of the country, you can go to Amazon, and then Jeff Bezos and gang will take a bite, which is fine. They're providing a service, and but ideally going to the publisher is better for them and for me. And then as far as a closing word, if you're on Facebook, I recently got off of Facebook, and I'll tell you briefly because it's because I detest it, because it's absolutely antithetical to the direction that I want my life to go, because it cheapens human interaction, and it's a parody of authentic sociality between people, and it's actively pernicious to human relations, and it spills over into the real world in such a caustic and brutal way that I just hate to be a part of it. But that being said, I periodically will be creeping in through my sister-in-law's account and putting current events or whatever I got going on my my author page there. So click and like and follow and all that stuff, and you can keep track of me there. I hope you. Last word. I hope you buy my book. I hope you enjoy it. My email is in there. I love talking about my work. I don't care who you are. Email me. I love talking about it, and hopefully, and again, not for money or for accolades or anything. Hopefully it becomes like a semi-canonical thing where people put it into their education program, like we used to do with the builders. We would just hand out the builders, boxes of builders books, But anyway, thanks, and thank you guys for having me on here. It's been a beautiful experience. I was nervous about it, but RJ was gentle with me. I thought he was just going to tear me apart here, but
You got to
it
pass.
was your first time. It's okay.
Yeah, I got to pass this time. And Juan, always a pleasure. I can't wait to see you again, pal around, have some laughs. And Jason, thanks for asking me on. John, you're one of the few people I miss on Facebook. When my meticulously groomed avatar of my actual self would interact with your meticulously groomed avatar of your real self in some virtual non-space, I thought that was tolerable.
That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about me. Oh, man. Well, the feeling is more than mutual, Jamie, so I appreciate having you on.
The feeling is virtual.
The feeling is virtually mutual. Yes.
Virtually mutual, but not mutually exclusive.
Or mutually virtual. Or virtually
mutually inclusive?
Juan, over to you. Why don't you take us home, Juan?
Jamie, it was a pleasure seeing you again. I'm with you. Look forward to all this pandemic getting by so that we can all get together and decompress and have a nice time together. For everyone listening, thank you so much for making the Masonic Roundtable part of your Masonic education diet. If you enjoy any portion of it, don't be greedy and share it with someone else. There are a lot of brothers out there who perhaps are missing spending time with their brothers-in-law. They're missing the different interactions and the different Masonic education topics. Send them one of our 300 plus episodes, whichever favorite you have, and share it with them. And my shameless plug, I encourage you to go to the Gentleman's Brotherhood on YouTube. Check out some of the videos that we're publishing there. The Gentleman's Brotherhood, although not a Masonic channel, it is intended to help men in their journey to becoming great men. And if that sounds like something that you or anyone you love could benefit from, go check it out. thegentleman'sbrotherhood.com. Thank you.
Robert, I think you're up.
I guess I am. That was a awkward, weird silence. All of a sudden, my picture got this big.
Oh,
Anyway, that's okay.
I blame
You're
the
just playing-
moderator.
Yeah.
New toys. New toys. All right, number one, Jaime Paul Lamb. Always a pleasure to have you on. The first time that you actually came on to WCY on a Whence Came You podcast, as I was re-listening to the interview, I think I had to take out a thesaurus. And since then, I've bumped up my vocabulary game at least 500%, thanks to Lumosity and some other things. But you're always amazing, so intellectual, and an absolute pleasure to talk to and to just listen to. I think you're really entertaining as well. So you have a unique blend of characteristics and traits that I think really allow you to speak to the topics that you do talk about. I would encourage everybody listening to really go pick up that book. Even if you're not super intellectual about things, I would get it, because I feel like you'll find something in there that you're going to underline. You're going to take out your pencil and write in the margin, and you're going to dive into something else and become a subject matter expert on something that you found in a book. It's just really a great journey in terms of that particular book. So check that out. Whence Came You is another Masonic podcast that I do Sunday nights, 9:30. We're starting a period of Whence Came You where I'll be doing some listener requested topics. So I emailed all of the patrons and PayPal supporters of Whence Came You and said, what do you want to hear about? And they threw a bunch of topics back at me. So I'm doing the research, and then I'm putting it back out there for you, the listener. The next episode, Brother Honeycutt asked me to do something about the Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite, different jurisdictions, and some commentary on that. So you can find that coming this Sunday. We've got a multitude of different topics coming up. And lastly, I want to say, go check out a website. It's called Esoteric Mason. And that is going to be a new publication from Laughing Lion. Ben Williams, publisher of Rocky Mountain Masons, putting out a new magazine. It'll be coming out twice a year, and it's going to be really good. You're going to find a lot of your favorite esoteric authors in there, and I think that's all I'll say tonight. So thanks to everybody for listening and watching and hanging out. And again, thanks, Jaime, for coming on and doing this whole thing. It's been awesome. Even if you hate Facebook.
Nice. All right, Jason, over to you.
All right, Jaime, this was a fantastic episode. So thanks so much for coming on and just spending some time with us and dazzling us with your brilliance, and sometimes baffling us as well. No, we would greatly appreciate it. Fantastic episode. It's always great chatting with you. You're one of those amazing thinkers that I really wish I could spend more time one-on-one with, because that couch is just so inviting. Anyway, thanks so much to Devin Lawson and Joe Martinez for the super chats tonight. You guys are absolutely awesome. And thanks so much to everybody watching and listening. We've had a really good couple episodes over the past couple weeks, and I'm excited about what we're going to see over the next couple weeks and months as far as topics are concerned. So go ahead and go to Patreon, look us up. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and click that subscribe button, because we'd love to keep in touch with you. So with that, John, I'll turn it right back over to you.
Sweet. Yeah, so this, again, a great episode. We wanted to kind of keep things flowing, and we just had a great conversation with Jaime Paul Lamb and everyone, because, again, I think the beauty of having these types of conversations lets us kind of share our experiences and learn something new every time. And that's really, I guess, what we should take away from this episode is learn something new, learn something that is different than your core set of beliefs, and see how it plugs in. If it doesn't, that's fine, but at least you've analyzed it and experienced it for what it is, instead of prejudging something like 2020 tends to do for everyone. So take that, go forward into the world, and try to be a better person as you do that. We'll be here next week, and we look forward to seeing you all. Thank you all very much for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.